Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's interview. Today, I'm sitting down with Jessica Hatcher. She is the creator of the Brave Like Wyatt movement. Jessica, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad because in my notes originally, I had wrote your name as Jennifer, and I'm so glad I checked that beforehand. I was like,
That would not be the millionth time that has happened, so that's okay.
I guess we can jump into it. Um, for those listeners at home who may not be familiar with Wyatt's story or kind of the background of the hashtag Brave Like Wyatt that we've seen on Michael McDowell's car, as well as Brett Moffitt's truck, if I'm correct, or I think his Bush car, Xfinity.
Yeah, his Xfinity car. Yep.
Yeah. I guess if you can tell us a little bit about who was Wyatt.
So Wyatt is our son. We have 5 children total in our family. He is our second oldest son, and Wyatt was born in 2008. He was born with a rare heart defect called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is a big mouthful of words, basically meaning that the left half of his heart did not function. And so obviously the left half of your heart is your pump, so it's quite vital to survival. So luckily we knew that before we had him. It was discovered while I was still pregnant with him, and we had kind of a treatment plan in place when he was born to undergo several heart surgeries to basically reroute his entire circulation. And what that would do is allow for the right side of his heart to do the job of both. They usually do those in staged surgeries because to do it at one time would just be way too much on an infant. But he had to be taken into surgery at 4 days old. This is a heart defect that is 100% fatal if there's not some type of intervention done. So that was done, and then he had another surgery at 4 months old, and then before he could get to the third surgery that's normally done around 3 years old, he went into heart failure. So we listed him for a heart transplant in March of 2010. So he was about a year and a half old, maybe not quite. And then in September 17th of that year, he actually got a new heart. We were very, very blessed and very lucky. Someone looked past their pain of losing their child and donated a heart to Wyatt. And he did great. It was fantastic. He had energy that he had never had before. He lived a very good quality of life. But when they did the transplant, they kind of told us, we're basically trading one set of problems for another. We have given him this heart, this kind of fully functioning heart here, but now he's going to have to take medications for the rest of his life to make sure that his body doesn't realize that this heart that we've just put in there isn't the one it made. And we don't want it to reject the heart. So he has to take this 2 types of anti-rejection medications. He'll have to take them for the rest of his life. And it basically suppresses his immune system. And unfortunately, when you suppress your immune system, you leave yourself open to a whole host of problems. One of the rarer problems that comes along with that, but the more serious problems, is lymphoma. And unfortunately, Wyatt did develop lymphoma. We found out in 2019 that he had stage 3 lymphoma, and he started chemo. Like literally the day we got a diagnosis, he started chemo that night. So we started chemotherapy. He did 4 rounds of chemotherapy over probably about a 5-6 month period. Obviously, with chemotherapy, you have a whole host of issues there as well. It was very difficult for him. He had a lot of infections. He was septic at one point. But all of those things he kind of overcame. And then in June, we finished chemo. And in August of 2019, he was scanned and he was clear. He was free of disease and he was cancer free. And we had a big celebration and we rang the bell, and we were really, really excited. It was kind of, this sigh of relief. Everything is over and everything is good. And so from kind of August until December, we had this really lovely time with him. We got to go to the beach. We got to do things. And he felt really, really good. And then all of a sudden, I think it was like the first week of December, he started feeling really bad, and on a Thursday, and literally from Thursday to Saturday. On Saturday, he was in ICU, and they were telling us that his heart was failing. And they did some tests and they were trying to figure out what was going on. And basically it came down to the chemotherapy that he had taken in order to cure the cancer had damaged his donor heart. And he was not eligible for a second transplant. There are UNOS rules that you have to be cancer-free or treatment-free for a year before you can be listed again for a heart. So he was only at that point 6 months out. And so we would have had to wait another 6 months to even be listed for a second heart. And he just did not last that long. He lasted about a month. They got him on medications for a period of 2 or 3 weeks. We really had hope that he was going to get better. Over Christmas, we were in the hospital, but we had a really beautiful Christmas with him that year. And then on January 10th of 2020, he passed away.
So, as someone who's not a parent, that's something I've always heard is like there's no bigger, pain or loss than a child. But through that tragedy, y'all decided to form Brave Like Wyatt. What was kind of the catalyst to forming something in his name, to continue his legacy of helping those who are in need?
Sure. So Brave Like Wyatt was a hashtag that we came up with, and I say we, but he, because all great things have come from him. But he kind of came up with, I spoke about that day that we got the cancer diagnosis and the night that we started chemo. And I really wanted to just kind of take his mind off of it, because he'd just gotten this really heavy news. Mm-hmm. And he was about to get hooked up to all of this medication. And for a 10-year-old, there's such a loss of control, yeah. And so just to give him something to take his mind off of it, give him something that he could, play around with. We're like, okay, we're going to order, everybody who doesn't have silicone bracelets for, going through something. So we're like, okay, we're going to order some bracelets, and, what are we going to put on them? And so we threw out a couple of things. And so hashtag Brave Like Wyatt was his choice. That was his thing. So, and when I say that he adopted it like that, it really, I'm not underestimating it when I tell you that really got him through things. Like, he had that put on his iPad. He was an artist. He would doodle Brave Like Wyatt, it just really, really became ingrained in him that he was brave enough to do this, and he was brave enough to get through all this. So, and then after he passed away, it was just something that we took on as our own family, that if he was brave enough to do all of those things, that we asked of him, and never complain, and he was just the sweetest kid, then that would be what we would do too, that we would be Brave Like Wyatt. And so as far as what we've turned it into, it wasn't quite long after Wyatt had passed away that my uncle came to me, and my uncle happens to be Marcus Barella, and he owns Freight Auctions, who is a sponsor for Michael McDowell and Brett Moffitt. And Marcus has done this journey with us. He was there a lot of the way. He was with us on that wonderful Christmas that we got to spend together. And he was with us during the day that we kind of spent in vigil when we knew that Wyatt was going to pass away that night. So he was with us through the whole thing, and he kind of came to me and said, I know your heart, and I know Wyatt's heart, and he wanted to be a child life specialist when he grew up. He wanted to help other people. He wanted to help kids like him. And another thing that Marcus had shared with us that had inspired him was that last day that Wyatt was sick, he wanted a Mr. Pibb. That was like his favorite thing in the whole world. Mm-hmm. He wanted a Mr. Pibb. And so we had family in the waiting room, and we sent them out on this expedition to find Mr. Pibb because the hospital didn't have it. And they ended up not like going to 3 stores, not being able to find Mr. Pibb, had to settle for Dr. Pepper, which, you know, in Wyatt's world was a fair enough close second. So he got his Dr. Pepper, but just that idea that there are families out there who are struggling and trying to take care of their children, and they have a need. And whether that need be financial, where they need some help this month paying bills, paying their rent, paying their mortgage, they need to keep the lights on, you know, they need help paying for gas to travel back and forth to the hospital to take care of their child, or, you know, it be as simple as their kid wants a Mr. Pibb and it is nowhere to be found. He was really inspired by that and came to me and said, I have this platform and I want to use it to do some good. And if you're on board, then we're going to roll with it. And I thought, heck no, there is no way this is happening. Like, I just lost my son 2 months ago. Like, I do not think that I can put myself into a place of like throw myself back into that world, you know, like there's no way to separate to do this kind of work and do this kind of thing and separate yourself from these families and what they're going through. It's going to put you right back to where you were before. So at first I was really, really hesitant. And then I thought, you know what, Wyatt wants us to do this. This is how we keep him in everybody's memory. This is how we do the work that he would have wanted to do as a grown-up that he's not going to get to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you guys race fans, or whenever they approach you and say, we're going to put you on the side of this stock car, like what was kind of the feeling with that when you were like, oh, we're going to be not only like a small sticker, but we're going to prominently be, you know, featured?
Yeah. So it, the first time I saw the car, and that's kind of a funny story, because the first time I saw the car, I was very excited. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This looks fantastic. You know, Sean McGee had designed the car. They had the scheme. And we are race fans. We like in our younger days, before we had 5 children, and it, you know, doesn't really allow for a whole lot of going to races. But my husband, you know, they would have guys weekends at Atlanta Motor Speedway when the races would come here. We're not far from Hampton at all. I've been to a couple races. I know, you know, my husband is a huge Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan. I was always a Jimmy Johnson fan. We were at odds. It was, you know, but we did watch racing. So we're familiar with the racing world, but I was definitely not familiar with the like spoken or unspoken rules of racing and this kind of whole like how the wheels work in the big, you know, in the big scheme of racing world. So I screenshotted the back of the car, thrilled, so excited. Oh my gosh, like here's Brave Like Wyatt. Because Sean did our logo and everything, like he designed it. It was amazing. It looked fantastic. It just popped. And so I screenshotted it and I put it on my story on Instagram, and I was kind of like sneak peek, so excited about it. And So apparently that's a no-no. That you are not supposed to let people know what your car looks like until, so luckily I had only done the back of it and I had not revealed anything about the actual paint scheme of the car. So I wasn't quite in so much trouble, but we were just extremely excited. It was really, really cool to see that. It makes me, every time I see it out there, I think, man, what would Wyatt think about this?
So tell us a little bit about the support you've received since kind of becoming a part of the NASCAR family.
So I think at this moment, I can confidently say that the NASCAR community as a whole has been the largest support that our foundation has received. As far as, so last year when we first, so we had this huge plan to roll out in Atlanta, like that was we were gonna be on Michael's car. We were, we were going to go as a family and experience, the whole thing. And then that was literally, I think Atlanta may have even been the first race that kind of just fell apart because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So we had these huge rollout plans and they just did not happen. And it was at that point that we kind of turned to social media, and Michael and Brett both of them have been huge to just go on Marcus's, opinion of us and faith in us, and to take that and to, because of COVID, having never, been able to actually meet us in person, just, have conversations like we are right now. They are such great supporters of our foundation and such great advocates, and will at any time, drop a video. Michael will drop a video on social media, or Brett will send out a tweet, and it's just so amazing the support that they give us to do that. Because when Atlanta fell apart and we weren't able to do what we wanted to do and hopefully go out and shake hands with all these people and meet them,
Mm-hmm.
and get in and grow this kind of support system, the community came in, the fans came in, and the other drivers, they challenged each other. And at that point in time, we were so affected by COVID. I think that as a family, personally, we were in this place of, we knew that the hospital was only allowing one parent at a child's bedside at a time. And all the hospitals have the regulations, and it's absolutely necessary to have those. But how heartbreaking is that? I think back to when they allowed me and my husband and my 4 other children to all pile in this hospital room and spend Christmas Eve night and spend the night in the hospital with Wyatt, and knowing that during COVID, nothing like that's going to happen. So how many of these families are in the situation that we're in, that are not going to get that opportunity to say goodbye, or get that opportunity to spend that time together, that that they'll be able to look back on and say, hey, this stinks, but we have this wonderful memory.
Mm-hmm.
So something that we had done was we wanted to collect iPads for the families. That Wyatt had an iPad. It was huge for him. Like, he would Life 360 his dad on the way, he's on the way to the hospital, and he would FaceTime his brothers, and, all of these things that kept the family connected when we couldn't be together. And I thought, man, this is what families need right now, because if you can only have one parent at the bedside, then, we need to get these in the hands of these families. And all of a sudden there's this social media campaign, and Brett's in on it, and Michael's in on it, and like, the NASCAR community just responded. And we were just blown away, because it was the first semi-big thing that we had done.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to buy 30 iPads for the hospital, which is unbelievable. So when I say that the NASCAR community is our largest supporters, like anytime that we ask them to do anything for us, they just show up. And what a great collective group of people, from drivers to teams to fans and everybody, just to say, you know, hey, we're going to throw our support behind this organization, and we're going to give them our hard-earned money, and we're going to, you know, we're going to let them help these families.
Yeah, I think as a NASCAR fan, whenever I tell non-fans about the how crazy NASCAR fans are in supporting, I'll tell them about like, oh yeah, like these people won't eat M&Ms because Kyle Busch drives for it. You know, even though they ate their whole life, you know, it's crazy on that end, but it's also like when it comes to like good causes and all, there's just as much support where it's, oh, we want to support because we know these people's story. We want, you know, it. And I think that's just it's hard to find a fan base that's that, you know, concentrated on wanting to help, you know, what they see and all.
Yeah.
For the listeners at home, where can they go to learn more about your organization or make a donation?
Sure. So we have a website set up. It is www.bravelikewyatt.com. And that website has a donation page on it. There's a place to donate right on the homepage, but there's also a donation page there. And they can learn a lot more about what we have been doing. We have several facets to the organization. We do a lot of community support because we are so close to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. We try to get the community involved. Which is fun because we get to do things with our children's schools and baseball, you know, our son's baseball program, and just churches local in the area to get them involved. And usually when that happens, we do some type of drive. Like right now we're doing a pantry drive. The cardiac unit at the hospital has snack carts in the ICU and in the step down units, and they stock it full of drinks and snacks, and the families have full access to that so that they don't have to leave to have something to eat, or they don't have to pay sometimes to have something to eat. So one of the things that we're doing locally right now is doing a pantry drive and collecting things like that. But we also have the more financial foundation aspect of Brave Like Wyatt, which is monetary donations, and those go to help families of chronically ill children. We do not limit the children that are eligible for our program. The only thing that we ask is that it be a family that is inpatient in the hospital, so that we know that it's something that, you know, they're there for the long run. They're in and out and things like that, or they're traveling back and forth. But as far as the child's diagnosis or things like that, we don't limit things. We usually coordinate. We have a wonderful relationship with the social workers at the hospital in the different departments. So we usually coordinate with them. They send us and refer us people who need help. So monetary donations usually go towards things like that. And we pay rents and utilities and car payments, and we pay for transportation assistance, and we also, unfortunately, when the worst happens, we help pay for funeral assistance. So, which is something, funeral assistance is something that there are not a lot of foundations in our area that assist with. So we have gotten, and sadly, a lot of requests for help with funeral assistance recently, but it's something that we've experienced and is near to our heart, and it's something that we want to help with, especially if we can relieve any family of the burden. You know, it's hard enough taking care of a sick child. It's hard enough having to bury a sick child. any way that we can relieve that burden just a little bit.
That's awesome. With this interview, with researching for it, as well as just being like in the interview, it's been awesome getting to learn about Wyatt's story. I think what makes it even more special is seeing that, with him, his legacy is continuing by helping so many people that have been in your situation. And, I just think it's crazy in life. I was talking to a friend yesterday about how we go through these things. At the time, it's so horrible to go through it, but then later on we see how many people we helped, because afterwards we're able to say, I've been where you are. This isn't me just trying to help you. I've literally been where you are. And I think with y'all's story, that's what makes it so amazing, that it wasn't just all right, well, here's Wyatt's story. It's still continuing, and all these people, and helping them to be brave like Wyatt. So
that's what we hope for so much, is that Wyatt's story continues, and that we can inspire people to be brave like, there's my little one there, that we can inspire people to be brave like Wyatt. And it's funny, like, we were watching this movie yesterday on Disney Plus, my kids and I, and it was a book that my other son had read like 2 years ago in school, and they just made the movie or whatever, like Flora and Ulysses or something like this. And it's about this like flying squirrel that has superpowers, or but we really have this kind of superhero theme going, and like throughout our foundation, just because Wyatt was a huge Marvel fan. Endgame was one of the last movies that we all saw together, like a huge Marvel fan. So we have this kind of superhero theme that kind of runs through everything. And like, we're sitting here watching this movie, and this little girl says, and I don't know if this is in the book, I don't know, if this was just adapted for the movie or whatever. I literally had to write it down, because you hear those things, sometimes you hear these things that like, you just kind of marinate on this, like, this thing for a minute. But she said that, I had to write it. It was like, maybe the best part of having a superhero around is how you start to feel like one too. And I thought, man, if that doesn't describe everything that we felt about Wyatt, and that we want to, just the core of what we are. Like, he was our superhero, and he was the bravest kid in the whole world to us. And to be able to somehow support other people to feel that way too, to feel like they can be superheroes, or they can be extraordinary, or they can be brave, is just, it's an honor. And for any way that we can, help do that is just wonderful for us. It makes us feel like superheroes. It makes us feel like Wyatt.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, getting to kind of share the story of Wyatt with the listeners at home.
Well, thank you so much for letting us do that. I think I'm so glad you reached out, and I'm so happy to share his story with everyone. And I'm excited that people will actually get the opportunity to learn what that means on the back of Michael or Brett's car.